Onto your Asian markets now. They traded mixed today with talk of economies that have been in lockdown opening up in a phased manner. There's hope and apprehension about the process given the possible risks of the further spread of the coronavirus if economies don't open up correctly. The Chinese authorities moved to add some stimulus to the mix following news that economy's GDP contracted by over 6% in the first quarter. The monetary policy move was more well received on mainland China and Hong Kong than other parts of the region. Over in Japan, news that country's bread and butter, that is their exports, had fallen more sharply than expected in March, saw the market flounder. The benchmark Nikkei share index ended the day down 1.15%, spurred by Chinese monetary authorities cutting the one-year loan prime rate by 20 basis points. The Hang Seng index was initially in the green but closed down 0.2%. Mainland China markets trended upwards, the Shanghai Composite Index firming by 0.5% at the close. Over in the United States, markets were lifted by US President Donald Trump, signaling that the US economy could begin to open up in a phased approach, depending on the discretion of each state. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose by 3%. The S&P 500 ended the day up 2.7%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq closed up 1.4%. Well, to give us a breakdown of what's been happening in the markets, I'm joined on the line now by Gary Boyson. He's a portfolio manager at Rand Swiss. Thanks very much for joining us, Gary. So we did see last week that there was sort of a bit of a firming of markets, and that was obviously positive, but that seems to have changed somewhat today. What's driving sentiment today?
I think certainly the collapse in the oil prices got everyone a little bit nervous. I think that's also helping to pull it down. Those weak Chinese GDP numbers on Friday also, I think, have the market a little bit concerned. And we are seeing, a little bit of a subsidence there, especially in oil-related stocks. You don't think of MTN as an oil-related stock, but obviously with its large presence in Iran and Nigeria, it is linked to oil-based economies, and we're seeing that stock down about just over 13%. And the coronavirus obviously still very front and center in traders and investors' minds. And you're seeing stocks that can largely, I suppose, avoid the damage. The likes of Naspers up 1%, just because it generates the majority of its revenue to gaming and doesn't require or at least doesn't rely on the complex supply chains that many other companies do. Overall, though, I think the story really is that our markets have rebounded strongly. So we had the US up 2.7% on Friday, and that takes it to almost 30% off lows. It just seems to me that the markets have maybe run a little bit ahead of themselves. We obviously are going to see severe fallout from the coronavirus and the impact of these shutdowns. And yet financial markets are behaving as if everything is okay. And I think partly this is due to stimulus, but at the same time, it does seem that markets have potentially run a little bit ahead of themselves.
Yeah, of course, with China, as you mentioned, that contraction that was announced last week or last Friday in the first quarter, that was down over 6%. Now the monetary authorities have kicked in to provide some stimulus, cutting interest rates further. All well and good, but the big question is, with the global market now said to be pretty much in recession, the IMF and the likes of those have said so, does it really matter for China because China is a counterparty with everyone else in the world?
There's no question that we live in a globalized society, and the fact that China is still the manufacturing base of the world, is significant. And while internal fiscal stimulus trying to support their businesses and providing liquidity to markets is one thing. No one lives in isolation. That said, I mean, you look at those GDP numbers. It's the first contraction since the mid-1970s that China has obviously admitted to. A lot of people a little bit concerned about Chinese statistics and what is reported. But I think it's a government that has to be seen to be acting. At the same time, though, you've got a lot of other countries also, trying to unwind themselves from those very, very complex Chinese supply chains. So if you look at someone like Japan has actually, they've actually set aside, the Japanese government has set aside $2.2 billion to help their companies, that is Japanese companies, unwind their supply chains out of China. So, while stimulus potentially will support Chinese businesses, the impact of the lockdowns, the impact of the way the global economy is working currently, frankly, is going to be significant, and we're going to see a changing pattern of the flow of goods and services into the foreseeable future.
Now, there's been a big debate about how to ease lockdowns around the world. I mean, President Trump was keen for the economy to be going ahead at full speed by Easter. Of course, that proved unrealistic. But now, how do we do that generally? What do you think needs to happen for markets or economies to open up gradually while at the same time not defeating the purpose of the lockdowns in the first place?
It's a very, very difficult question. I wish I had the answer to it. If you look at it, certainly, you're always trying to balance. You're trying to find that equilibrium point between, not damaging your economy to such an extent that you end up with starvation and loss of lives and loss of income of so many people that the end negative benefit is worse than if you had taken a more Sweden-like approach and left your economy open. And at least not potentially lock down the economy. So it's really about trying to balance out, human life, and that's very difficult because we've had the World Health Organization coming out and saying that there is a possibility that no vaccine is found as well. So while all the best and brightest minds are focusing on trying to create a vaccine, trying to create a treatment, and we've had very, very positive indicators, World Health Organization saying that this is not a given, and you can't assume that it is a given. Now, if you are just slowly bring economies back on steam, there is no doubt that you're going to have an increase in infection rates. You're going to see the numbers of infected increasing dramatically. And it comes down to, I suppose, maybe more alternative solutions, like, the ability to roll out widespread testing so that you can see who has potentially had the virus, although at this stage, even if you've had the virus, it doesn't necessarily mean you've got immunity. But at this stage, when you've already faced a lockdown like we have, which is one of the more stringent lockdowns around the world, you've got to also balance this against the fact that you need to get your economy working again because, you cannot stay shut down for an infinite period of time because obviously that's going to result in a higher death toll. So at the moment, already it looks like the mines are going to be going back to work at 50% capacity. There's all sorts of ideas on how we could potentially fund opening the economy. There was reports this morning that there could potentially be a once-off wealth tax. But I think it's a very, very difficult thing that we're going to look at. And, whether it's going to be a period of, easing up and then relocking down to try and help our healthcare services last, it's still very, very uncertain. And it's a very, very difficult task. And there's a lot of unknowns that our government is trying to grapple with in making the best decision.
Indeed, Gary, people are saying that this is uncharted territory, unprecedented indeed. That was Gary Boyson. He's a portfolio manager at Rand Swiss. We're going to take a quick look at the indicators. Okay, we're going to go for a quick break. More news for you thereafter.
Across the country, we had thousands of reclaimers.
The lockdown has lived up to its name, closing all doors on everyone, including recyclers.
It has been a tough period for these men and women.
Let's just see what it is that we can do.
We managed to mobilize all of the food parcels.